If you've ever found yourself wondering how to get someone to treat you better, if you've silenced your needs, second-guessed your worth, or turned to relationship strategies that ask you to be less of yourself just to feel safe, this episode is for you. Today we're exploring why manipulation-based advice and dark psychology, even when it's subtle, disconnects you from your truth, from your power, and how to create your own soul-led rules instead. Not to control anyone or to create an outcome, but to come home to your own inner clarity, your self-respect, and your own intuitive knowing. You don't need to be harder to get. You need to be harder to lose by becoming a person who no longer abandons yourself for love. Let's begin.
You're listening to the Intuitive Mastery Podcast. Hi, I'm Kate Connolly, and with over 15 years of intuitive healing and teaching experience, I'm here to help you celebrate intuition and value authenticity to create a world where you have the freedom to live your best life. This podcast is here to teach you how to apply the principles of spirituality, healing, and mindset to have true and lasting joy, all from the inside out. This is the Intuitive Mastery Podcast.
Hi everybody, welcome to this week. The topic is a little bit new to me, I have to say. It kind of came across the front of my lows last week and it completely took my attention. And it made me realize that this is potentially a trap or like a way of being that is kind of bringing a lot of people in unwittingly, but also not necessarily creating the outcome that they're looking for. And I've now had two pieces of advice in the last week around this. One through an amazing video that I saw from Jimmy on Relationships on YouTube. So if you haven't come across him yet and you want to learn all about really beautiful heart-led clarity and awareness and love-based relationship advice, he is your man. He's just amazing. Go and check him out if you like him. And what I also found in one of these videos is this link from a woman who said, yeah, I've really struggled with being heard and feeling empowered in my relationships. So I read this book and my previously manipulative partner just became this amazing person to me. And I was immediately intrigued. I thought, this is really fascinating. So I kind of cut and pasted the title of the book and chucked it into a search engine. And it came up with this concept of dark psychology. And I'm like, wow, what is that? Like, I don't really know what that is. I've never come across it before. This is really fascinating. And so I kind of did a bit of research. I kind of looked into it more deeply. And there was just all of these really interesting intuitive alarm bells going off in my body. And when that happens, I always pay attention because my intuition knows, my soul knows. And so I just kind of dug a little bit deeper. And this is kind of like one of the really fascinating hooks that people get caught into, is this concept that in order to get people to treat you well, you have to like make them on some level. And literally only a few days after that, I had the advice of a book from a friend of mine who's very intelligent, has done a lot of work and used it with her partner to great effect. And it's not dark psychology necessarily, but it has all of these rules that people need to follow in order to hook their person. And this book was specifically for women to hook their man and to keep them interested and to keep them chasing you and things like that. And I'm not necessarily saying it wouldn't work. But I also had these intuitive alarm bells going off and I just thought, oh my gosh, this has happened twice in a week. I think I need to talk about it. So I've done a little bit of research, not a lot. If you want to learn more, obviously just go and do your own research and find out what feels true for you, because ultimately this is not about me telling you what to do. This is about inviting you to explore yourself more deeply so that you can find your truth. And I want you to, with this information, just sit sit with what really resonates as true for you and what doesn't, because that is actually what helps to mold your own decisions. What I say isn't gospel. What anybody else says is not gospel for you. Ultimately, your truth has to come from your inner knowing. And this is why it's so important for us to acknowledge all of the bits of information out there and then bring it back to yourself, bring it back to what it is that you need for yourself in your life. So what I found this is really fascinating is that when people move to using dark psychology, my understanding is that it often comes in response to being treated badly. All right. So either being in a relationship that's either trauma bonded or with a narcissistic energy, or with someone who's just emotionally immature, where you feel powerless, where you feel like you don't have a voice, that you're not heard, that you're not being held, that you're not in a place that actually really kind of feeds your soul. And I know that Jimmy on Relationships is very much into that very pure, heart connected, soul connected, vulnerable, honest, like genuine relationship. So I found it really fascinating that one of his listeners, and he's got like 1 million listeners, but one of his listeners was kind of really giving advice to go into this dark psychology, which doesn't seem to align with his values at all. And I know that this created a lot of confidence in this person, and that's really fantastic. Confidence is key. But ultimately, it feels like you're taking their manipulation and you're making it your own. So it's kind of like a tactic designed to override someone's autonomy. But instead of you being manipulated by them, you become the manipulator. And it can be really subtle and it can be seductive and it is socially acceptable, which I find really interesting. But the outcome can lead to pain, disconnection, inner distortion, this sense of like, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel right. It works, but I feel a bit icky inside. Like this person did come to me and do what I want, but oh, I just feel horrible about this. This isn't great. And if you are an intuitive person, if this is something that that creates like a resonance inside of you, then this might be really important to understand, because ultimately, when we are intuitive, when we are really energetically aware, and when we are attuned to other people's energy, this stuff is super important, because if we start behaving out of integrity, then we become the very thing we're trying to avoid being with, right? And we don't want to become that, really. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to become that. I don't want to become a person that is not genuine and not vulnerable and not real, because that takes me away from my soul essence. And ultimately, for me to have my ultimate relationship, I need to be coming forward with my soul essence, with my truth, an undiluted truth, not a manipulative ploy or a rule to make someone behave in a certain way. All right. And I think what's really tricky and confusing is that people that get drawn to this kind of information are people who are suffering from a lack of confidence, who are struggling with being seen and heard, who are just looking for strategies and ways and reasons to help themselves get to a place where their needs are going to be met. And I wish it was as easy as like turning to something to dark psychology, but ultimately it uses the very things that we're trying to avoid, the very things that allow intimacy. It seems like these things are advising you to use things like fear and guilt and confusion or control to get people to behave in a certain way, and often without them realizing it. And ultimately then you become the manipulator. And if you've been at the hand of manipulation, I hope you can see that that isn't really going to work for long-term intimacy, connection, and trust. So some of the examples of dark psychology are things like gaslighting, intermittent reinforcement, so going from hot to cold, silent treatment as a punishment, withholding love to gain power, love bombing followed by devaluation, and covert blame or control masked as helping. So what it does create is dysregulation. It builds anxiety, not intimacy, and it forces compliance, not connection. So ultimately, if you're doing even really, really subtle versions of this with certain eye movements or certain body language or certain ways of speaking to try and get them, like all of that is with an outcome in mind. So if you are using behavior to force an outcome, whatever that outcome might be, you are still manipulating someone even if you don't want to be. It's really subtle, but it's so important to understand this. And I understand because I'm a super intuitive person and I'm always looking for ways to help improve relationships. I use it in my school, in the Intuitive Mastery School, to help with healing stuff for people, to help guide people with their own relationships or with their own life goals, whatever they're dealing with at the time. And intuitive women or intuitive people can get really caught up in this because we really want to feel like we are being valued. And there are ways that we can do that. That's either going along that dark psychology manipulative path, or we can do it from a place of honesty, trust, and vulnerability. And the second one, it actually requires a vibrational shift. It's not enough to just say it. We actually have to be it. And that road is harder. I'm not going to lie to you. It's harder. But ultimately, what you're going to end up with is so much more powerful and deep than the other road, which is kind of using tactics and rules and ideas to get people to behave a certain way, right? It's kind of, it's a subtle but very obvious manipulation from what I can see. All right. So one of the issues with intuitive people is that we pick up on energetic inconsistencies really fast. So we know when things don't feel quite right. All right. And if then we start behaving that way, then we're going to constantly feel like we're not quite right ourselves, like there's something not right there. Okay. But we've also been conditioned to override our gut knowing. So at the very least, if I get my physical outcome, if this person comes to me and says what I wanted them to say, or if they do what I wanted them to do and my tactic worked, well then, hey, if the outcome justifies the means as a tactic on how to treat somebody, then where's the limit there? Like, what are we actually going to continue to do to create the outcomes that we're looking for? So trauma survivors have learned that love can mean walking on eggshells or managing someone else's emotions. And manipulation feels familiar to a lot of these people, okay? But it's not safe, and it's definitely not love. So if you've been caught in a trauma bond where you have been the rescuer of the victim and you are really stuck in where you are, becoming the manipulator doesn't make that better. It doesn't make it okay. It shifts the power dynamic, but power isn't love, and winning isn't love, and manipulation absolutely, definitely is not love. So it's really tricky, right? But one of the clarifying questions you could ask yourself is, if you're questioning whether something is real in your head, that's probably your first clue. Like, is this real or is this in my imagination? And that's probably your first clue to start recognizing that something doesn't feel right. Okay. Did he really say that to me? Am I really getting this emotion? Did he really connect me with it? Did they really do that for me? Am I really feeling this? Is this real person really caring about me? When you're asking those questions, you already know something's off, like something's not quite right there. When someone says they love you and they mean it and they feel it, you know, you feel it, you know it, it's real. Okay, you don't have to question that. But if you are questioning stuff, then something energetically isn't right, and you've got to pay attention to that. If you're playing by the rules of dark psychology, it can still cost you your own self-trust. You can become emotionally exhausted because it feels like it's just a constant game and something you've got to stay on top of. So you can never really relax and be yourself. You can silence your own needs to keep someone else regulated, which again is just cutting off your own need, cutting off your own intuition, and really starting to suppress your own energy, which again is going to feel really off and you're going to start questioning yourself. Okay, so what actually works instead? Okay, personally, because I work in this and because I believe it, it's all about using a more intuitive relationship model. And everyone is going to be really different. Now, you can use basic kind of rules, I say that really loosely, like the Gottman method, because they use values and ideas on how to actually kind of show up in your relationship. It doesn't tell you what to say. It doesn't tell you how to say it, really, but it gives you values and emotional constructs to understand how you're showing up can impact the other person quite profoundly. And it's really allowing and inviting openness and honesty and vulnerability and connection rather than manipulation and lies and kind of rules to create an outcome. Okay. So what we want to do is we kind of want to break this into 4 pillars, right? So the first one is like truth over tactics. Okay. So it's so important to always speak from your center and not from a strategy. You've got to say what's real and not what's clever. Just come into your heart space, because ultimately, if you're trying to have a connected, real conversation with someone, they can always tell. If they're starting to question in their mind, is this real or is this in my head? I'm telling you, it's not okay, and they will not take it well. If you're coming from your truth and your vulnerability, you're also coming from a place of love, and love always lands well. If you are coming from a place of tactic, if you're coming from a place of being clever rather than real, that is often from a place of fear and very rarely lands well. You may get the behavior that you're looking for, but that is a performance and that's also not real. So if we're looking for deep, connected, loving, real relationships, we have to be super careful about not creating and pushing a particular outcome. Okay, number 2 is safety in yourself, not in their response. Okay, so this is where a lot of your own inner work can come in. If you feel particularly triggered by your partner, if you've got particular behaviors that you're struggling with, if there are certain elements of your relationship that are troubling you, that is actually your stuff to work through. You need to heal whatever is happening in your own past that's creating your triggers. Now, I'm not saying their behavior is okay. It may not be. But your trigger and your emotional response is actually always your responsibility, always. And I say that from a huge amount of humility as someone who doesn't always manage that. And I've had 20 years of experience. So this is not about perfection. This is just about being real, okay? So remember, regulating your nervous system before engaging with someone is super important. If this is something that is highly emotionally charged for you, see if you can do some healing work, get a healing session with someone or do it on yourself. We do a lot of this stuff in the Intuitive Mastery School. Learn how to work through the things that trigger you and then breathe. Get your nervous system regulated, slow your breath down, okay? And then engage with someone. Don't do it from a place of escalation, and definitely don't do it from a place of fear, okay? You don't need to be heard to know your truth. And you also don't need to convince someone of your own truth. You just need to speak it and be done. That's it. There's nothing else that you need to do, okay? Number 3, sovereignty before solution, okay? You are not here to be fixed and you are not here to fix them, okay? If someone needs control to feel secure, then that's their healing, that's their stuff, and that is not your job to regulate, like not at all. Okay, you've got to ask yourself if you're giving your power away to avoid discomfort, and your truth should not come at the cost of regulating someone else's emotions. Like that should never be the case. And number 4, Boundaries without threats, okay? Boundaries aren't punishments, they are clarity. You don't need to say, if you don't do this, I'll leave. You simply act in accordance with your values, okay? Ask yourself, what am I teaching people by what I allow? Where are my boundaries? What are my values and what do I need? And outside of that, what am I prepared to do if my needs are not being met? That is not about manipulation. That is purely about yourself. You are not forcing an outcome. You are not telling people how to be. You're just letting them know what's real and true for you. And then if they cannot honor that, then you have choices to make. So most importantly, it's about finding your own intuition in all of this, okay? How to tune back into your own compass. How do you even know how to do this? So I've got a few questions that I want, or that you can go through to kind of figure this out for yourself. So it's always about creating the right conditions, okay? First of all, we've kind of spoken about this with the nervous system overload. But if you are overwhelmed, if you're really emotional, it's extremely difficult to tune into your own intuition. So start from a regulating place instead, okay? And by that, I mean find a way to slow everything down. I have entire podcasts on this, on how to de-escalate yourself. If you're super stressed, if you can't think clearly, maybe try and exercise or do something that's vigorous to clear your energy a little bit. And then otherwise, what you need to be doing is you need to be slowing your breath down. Slow it down. Place your hands on your heart or your womb. Just like really give yourself a few minutes here. Breathing in for 5 seconds, breathing out for 5 seconds is really good at regulating the nervous system. Sometimes if you want to kind of make your exhale even longer than the inhale, that can be really helpful. But just allow and affirm to you that it is safe to hear the truth. It is safe to speak your truth, okay? You just need to listen to what it is within your body first, okay? So number 2, this is about reflection, relationship reflection, okay? This is how we create our own rules. This is not about trying to follow a set of specific guidelines on how to get them to do what you want to do. That's never going to work. It works maybe briefly, but you are not building trust there. You are creating a manipulative situation, okay? So reflect within instead. It's always more powerful. It's harder, yes, but it's way more powerful in the long run, and you will end up with a much, much healthier relationship, okay? So number 1, when you are with your partner, do you feel more like yourself or less? Question 1. Question 2, am I walking on eggshells to keep the peace? Big one. Number 3, if nothing changed in the next 6 months, could I stay with an open heart? Number 4, do I feel safe to express my truth? And when I do, what happens? Number 5, when I speak my needs, are they met with care or criticism? And number 6, am I holding this relationship together by managing their emotions? So when you ask these, just pause. And if you feel a contraction, pay attention to it. And listen to where in your body you feel that no, okay? And even if your mind still says but, it's your body, it's your knowing that's going to have that proper, true response. You can start going into questions about your self-worth. You know, what am I afraid will happen if I ask for more? That's a really simple question. What would I say if they definitely wouldn't get angry or shut down when I spoke to them, right? Am I hoping I'll finally get treated the way that I treat them? What am I tolerating because I don't want to be alone? And what does the little inner child inside of me actually want right now? Okay, this is such a powerful one because we often get triggered by our relationships as children, and we get really deeply influenced by our primary caregivers, whether it's parents or adoptive parents or aunts or uncles or whoever it might be. We are deeply impacted by their relationships and what happens with them, whether we like it or not. And as much as we don't want to dive into this stuff, Usually it's necessary on some level if we are continually in a relationship where our needs are not being met, we are triggered by other things, or we are attracting people that we feel like we need to get into dark psychology to work with. Okay. So remember, what would you do if you fully trusted your worth? Would you do something different? Would you change how you're showing up? If you weren't afraid of being judged, what would change? What version of you would rise if you stopped managing their feelings? This is a really powerful one. And what would life feel like if you were deeply respected every day? And who are you when you are not trying to fix anyone? I know I went through those so quickly. So if you want to just go back and pause and reflect and listen, write it down, just get super clear on this, okay? Because ultimately, those are the questions that formulate your own rules. What is it that I can tolerate? What feels like it is too much for me? There are basic relational things that sometimes we don't know that we're worth, and sometimes reading books can be very helpful to give us that information. What am I actually worthy of? It's about honoring your knowing, okay, without forcing action. You don't have to force anything. This is about knowing who you are and knowing what you need at all times, okay? So you don't have to do anything today about this, but once you've located your truth, begin creating space for it, all right? Start this in your own daily life. So that might look like saying no when it's easier to say nothing. It might be about creating a bit of emotional space before physical distance, just so you can regulate yourself. It's not manipulation, it's to breathe. It's to give yourself a moment to reset rather than constantly being reactive to somebody, okay? It's about naming how you feel without expecting them to understand. And it's about gathering support. So whether you need therapy, whether you join spiritual groups, whether you join the Intuitive Mastery School, which, by the way, it is a weekly dive into all things around intuition and inner work and finding your truth in all things. And you're doing it in a safe community where we all are held with our own truth. So if you want to join and you want to learn more about this and you want to really get clear on how to tune into this, click on the link below and you can join up. And we meet at 6 a.m. Sydney time every Wednesday. Okay, so we want to gather support regardless of what's coming up, all right? And you want to have that help to navigate what's coming next. There's lots of community services around in most places. And for those who don't, you have things like the Mastery School. You also can have family members who are trusted, best friends who are trusted. I don't recommend leaning on those people too much because they can be involved in your relationship a bit too much. Try and find neutral parties as best you can, but find the truth of the support that you need and seek that, okay? Because that's really important. And just remember, you're not crazy, demanding, or too much for wanting love to feel kind, clear, and reciprocal. It's so normal and really understandable why you would try to go to books or information that focus on dark psychology or focus on rules that you must work through in order to get the person to whatever, chase you, love you, call you up 23 times a day. Maybe that's too much, but do it, whatever it is that you're looking for, right? And if you bypass your own needs and your own knowing and your own truth, you're creating a setup that isn't real in the first place anyway. You're creating a setup based on someone that isn't you. And I know it's easier said than done, but if you are stuck in this situation, go through those questions, like find out more about you so that you in your entirety can show up. You can state your needs without apology. And then it's up to them to decide if they are going to show up for you. And do you really want someone that's only going to meet your needs when you manipulate them into it? Or do you want to have someone who's going to show up for you because they truly love you exactly the way that you are? It's food for thought. Anyway, sending lots of love. I hope this was really helpful, and I'll see you next time.